Hello. So great to have you this evening. You are my first non-arts, non-music guest for this podcast called Tales.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll tell you what, sexuality is an art. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So I can't get away from it anyway then.
Can't get away from it. Yeah. The art of conversation, the art of communicating about intimate topics. So we'll stick it in under that umbrella. But thank you. I appreciate your branching out.
Yeah. So you're Dr. Kimberly Resnick Anderson.
Yes.
Sex therapist. Here's a
Yes.
disclaimer though. I've known you for probably close to 40 years or so.
This is true. We are high school buddies.
Yeah. I didn't have many classes with you back in high school.
Nope. Good old brush high, 1985.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think we had too many classes together.
Did you you actually graduate with me, or
I did?
You were at the ceremony and all that?
Yes, I spoke at the ceremony.
I don't remember that? God.
I gave the convocation for our class of 85.
So yeah, going back then in 1985, our graduation was held at a place called the Front Row in Highland Heights, Ohio.
Yes.
And it was
Blast
really
from the past, and it's been closed for decades.
Gosh, I know.
It was a theater in the round. It was a great venue. It's a shame. Just to be clear, I'm not a doctor.
Oh wow.
So I don't want to misrepresent myself. I am a assistant professor of psychiatry at UCLA School of Medicine, and a licensed clinical social worker and a certified sex therapist, but I do not have my doctorate. So I just wanted to have full transparency about that.
We won't put doctor in the promos here.
And I tell people all the time, I'm not a doctor, and they say, okay, Dr. Anderson. So people have a need to experience, I guess, their therapist as a doctor. So I'll take it, but I can't claim it.
Wow. So for your undergrad, after Brush High, you stayed in Ohio?
No, I went to school in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
and
wow.
I went to American University, and I studied abroad in England for a year, and I double majored in psychology and communication with a focus on broadcast journalism.
Oh, how fun.
So nothing to do with nothing to do with sexuality anyway.
You just fell into it. So how did it all start with you getting into this field?
Well, I come from a family of mental health professionals. My dad is a psychiatrist, forensic psychiatrist. And so there was lots of talk about different cases and mental health disorders in the home. He evaluated criminals and murderers and assessed their sanity at the time of a crime. So it's sort of in the blood. There's a lot of members of my extended family who are in helping professions, but I did not get that bug. And I went into an extremely superficial industry, advertising and marketing and public relations, and found within a couple of years that it was unfulfilling to me, that I wanted to help people. And I had this lifelong interest in human sexuality and sexual health from the time I was a teenager through undergrad and into my working years. I was curious about the role of sexuality in our culture and all the mixed messages around sex, and why some people are faithful and others aren't, and just all the inputs that shape our notions about sex. So I wanted to write a book. And then I quickly realized you can't just write a book. You kind of have to have some credentials. So I decided to go to graduate school and get as much of a focus around sexual health and relationships as possible within my master's program. So I went to school at Case Western Reserve University, in Cleveland. Went to MSAS, got my master's. And then during my tenure as a student, I was able to secure an internship at a private sexuality center affiliated with the university. I ended up doing a 5-year postgraduate fellowship there afterwards. So I've just really immersed myself in all aspects of sexuality, orientation, gender identity, intention, and really got a sense of the phases of sexual response and what are the barriers and what can go wrong, and how early sexual experiences, both positive and negative, have a legacy on our sexual self-esteem and comfort. So after that, I went out on my own for a couple of years. And then I worked at a hospital. I created and was the director of a Center for Sexual Health at SUMA Health System in Akron. And then I, after 20 some years of practicing in Ohio, moved to California, where I practice now in Hollywood, and I have a private practice. And I teach at the medical school at David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. I teach doctors how to talk about sexuality with patients, how to take sexual histories. And I also teach them about innovations in sexual medicine. I have a podcast called Sex Savvy, which is available on any podcast platform. And I have I'm a expert on pornhub.com. There's some videos there. So I like to offer sex education to as many people as possible. So I write and I speak and I teach and I have a clinical practice and I'm a mom. So I'm a pretty busy gal.
So what brought you out west, leaving Ohio? Did you have family ties or anything that's brought you out?
No family ties per se. I wanted to be practicing in a more progressive part of the country. I found Ohio to be quite provincial in terms of sexual health. And I was just bumping up against corporate values and mores in the hospital system where I worked. I wanted to be in a part of the country where I could be a kink-friendly provider and I could openly treat LGBTQ members of the community and work with people who practice what's called consensual non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy. And in Ohio, those things certainly happen, but they're not as freely accepted and talked about as they are here on the West Coast.
I would think, though, more recently, though, with the culture changing so much, though, you think in the Midwest it's changed a bit since you've left?
It certainly has changed, but it's not like it is on either coast.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. You're
Yep.
definitely in the Mecca where there's just this uber open-mindedness. I'm sure.
Yes, I am in the Mecca of sexual depravity. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's just great to be able to be in a community where people can express themselves and not have to hide in the shadows.
So you get all types of clients, though, I'm sure, that run the whole gamut. So how is that? Have you seen like couples come in, let's say, and do you see the progression when you do that? How quickly do you see that?
Yeah, I have some couples I've been treating for over 20 years that have followed me from office to office, state to state. So I've had the honor and privilege of watching them, raise their kids and go through all sorts of transitions. I work with, I would say at least half of my practice is couples. Then I would say the remaining half, I would say 70% are men. And then 30% are women in an individual format. I also run groups. Love to run groups. It's my favorite.
So yeah, different type of group workshops. What's that like? I mean, how many are in a workshop?
I run groups, usually 7 to 9 people in a group max. I kind of think 7 is a sweet spot. And the groups are centered around some specific theme around sexuality. So it might be a group for men who have erectile dysfunction, or it might be a group for men who have pornography addiction. And then we discuss each of their personal struggles and triumphs in context of that particular sexual health concern. So I run a group for women with low libido. I run postpartum depression groups. I've run groups for sex offenders and incest offenders. I've run groups. I run a group now for adult baby diaper lovers. It's a kink. I interviewed someone on my podcast, a patient of mine, and then I interviewed a professional mommy who is available for hire to interact with adult babies and act out different scenes. I never expected the result. I've heard from adult baby diaper lovers from, I think, 15 different countries.
That's amazing.
And I have received messages such as, thank you for depathologizing our kink or our sexual interest. I've never heard any professional talk about us with such respect and compassion. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for shining a light on our community. Just an incredible outpouring of appreciation. And I probably get a message from a AB or a DL or an ABDL probably 2 or 3 times a month now, even after 2 years since that first aired. So yeah, you name it, I've seen it. You name it, I treat it.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, you think about kinks and stuff like that. What do you think, like, actually starts that? Is this like the savoring the unknown, something that's very taboo, and it just like kind of just makes people get into those kind of things?
Well, I think some people are exposed to things that they wouldn't necessarily have stumbled upon on their own, and then they find it intriguing or interesting. But most of my patients found themselves aware of some unconventional sexual interest at a very young age, even pre-puberty often. I treated a man who watched Batman, the original Batman with Adam West, the live action. And he was 5 or 6 years old, and he remembered seeing when Catwoman or any damsel in distress was tied to a chair with rope. He said by age 5 he fell in love with the ropes, and he was absolutely fascinated. It wasn't an erotic sensation for him at that time, but there was something super compelling about the ropes. And he went on to practice BDSM in his relationships as an adult, and he swears that from the time he was 5 years old, that was his true love. He just absolutely fell in love with ropes.
I would think it was maybe some kind of comfort or something. It's like you saw that at such a young, impressionable age, and it's like there's a familiarity with that, so you kind of build off of that, and it probably floods into sexuality.
Yeah, a lot of things shape our sexuality. A lot of things you wouldn't suspect. A lot of fetishes are born out of early life experiences. I've treated men who have erotic interest in enemas. And it's because at a young ages they were given enemas by a grandmother or a mother, and somehow something got linked up with the sensation, the bodily sensations, and that care and interest in that part of their body, and then it just became eroticized, and it became a requirement for them in their adult life sexually.
So you help them deal with, like, because I'm sure they probably feel a certain societal shame in that. So you work with them through that?
Absolutely. Some people come to me because they want to extinguish a kink or a fetish that they have shame about. Others come to me just to understand their kink and talk about it, to make peace with it and make friends with it. They're not necessarily looking to get rid of it. They just want a safe space to discuss the role of that fetish in their life, what it means to them, and how to communicate about it if they choose. to a partner or other people in their life.
Yeah, it's so important. And it's good that you have a safe space for people like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people have shared things with me that their spouses don't know, that they never said out loud ever. It's a real privilege to have access to people's private, intimate, sacred, erotic interests and experiences. So I do take that very seriously. And I try to show respect for anything that someone is comfortable sharing with me.
Wow, amazing. And it's not just straight singles and couples. It runs the whole gamut. You got polyamory,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
BDSM. Yeah, I mean, it's totally
Yep.
runs the whole
I
gamut.
treat a lot of transgender patients. I have quite a few gay couples and individuals that I work with, a lot of people in the BDSM or kink community, but I also treat a lot of sexual dysfunction, such as rapid ejaculation or erectile dysfunction or inability to achieve orgasm or low libido or a discrepant sexual interest among a couple. So where one person has a high sex drive and the other has a lower sex drive, and help them kind of negotiate and deal with the conflict around that discrepancy. I work a lot with people with medical issues as well. So, for example, like the impact of chemotherapy on sexuality, or the impact of chronic pain, or some other kind of acute medical problem or long-term medical problem, and how to kind of reclaim their sexuality alongside of having some sort of illness or disability. So yeah, you name it, I treat it.
Yeah, it's so sad when there's stressors, and stressors do affect that part of our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Terrible. Yeah.
Well, I treat a lot of women with pelvic pain. They
Oh.
feel betrayed by their bodies. They feel broken. They feel like they are robbed of their femininity. And it can be quite complicated to negotiate that in a relationship when your partner wants penetrative sex, but you're unable to have penetrative sex. So I run a couple of support groups for women with sexual pain. Yeah, there's a lot under the umbrella of sexual health.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably can come up with ideas for alternatives if you don't want the conventional.
Absolutely. Creativity and playfulness and sense of humor go a long way when there's some sort of limitation in terms of function. And I also work closely with sexual medicine physicians and other types of doctors, OB-GYNs, urologists. I work with pelvic floor physical therapists. So I have assembled a sort of dream team of providers so that I can refer my patients to the appropriate person to treat their sexual health concern in a multidisciplinary, comprehensive way.
I've had people say to me, there's no such thing as sex addiction. Come on.
Yep.
What's your take on it? Like David Duchovny went into a facility.
I know, yeah, David Duchovny, he's a poster boy. So this is very controversial within the field of sexual health. There are two camps. There are people who believe in sex addiction, and they tend to be more generally, don't send hate mail yet, but generally more pathologizing of sex. And then there are people who are more progressive and tolerant and less labelly. So the term sex addiction is not really used anymore. We prefer the term out of control sexual behavior, OCSB. And that just means that someone's engaging in a behavior that's causing impairment or difficulty in their life. And we stay away from the addiction label per se, although there are plenty of clinics who still use the term sex addiction and provide so-called sex addiction treatment. Plenty here in LA, dozens and dozens. I prefer the term out of control sexual behavior.
Yeah, I would think that too. Do you think that kind of relates to maybe, I don't know if sex offenders could fall into that kind of category? They just simply are just so out of control that they just end up doing things they completely regret, I would think.
Well, there's a wide range of motivations, and this gets a little dense, but there are people who engage in sexual crime for a wide multitude of motivations. So sometimes they have an antisocial personality where they just have a more criminal nature, criminal orientation. Sometimes it's exploitive and opportunistic. Sometimes it is based on legitimate arousal template or sexual script. For example, someone with erotic interest in children. And by the way, most pedophiles, that's the clinical criteria for pedophilia, is a primary erotic interest in children. Most pedophiles don't molest children, and most men who do molest children don't meet the clinical criteria for pedophilia. So think of it as a Venn diagram. Most men who do molest children are doing so because they're either intoxicated or opportunistic or exploitive, or maybe for revenge, or they're, really maybe developmentally disabled. There's a wide range of reasons why someone might engage in the sexually offending behavior.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah. And just to register as a sex offender, I'm sure has got to be so devastating to people like around somebody who's been registered. I'm sure like everybody's like, stay away.
Yeah. And I think that the registry had good intentions, but I think it's gotten out of control now to the point where, for example, child pornography,
Right.
Knowingly viewing or downloading child porn is a federal felony with mandatory prison time attached to it, mandatory sentencing guidelines. But I've treated a lot of men who looked at child porn, but who never touched a child in an inappropriate way, who ended up spending a lot of time in prison and were registered, had to, be on the sex offender registry. And they've never, I'm not minimizing
Right.
I'm not defending the looking of child porn, child porn. But I think there's a difference between what we say in the biz, viewers versus doers.
Right. Yeah.
And I think viewers are treated as doers in a way that doesn't seem fair and just, but nonetheless, that's the law, and
Right.
that it is what it is. And there are groups, active people out there engaged in activism, trying to change some of those laws. But I do treat a lot of men who have erotic interest in children, and most of them are terribly disturbed by it, wish that they could change it, and have never actually touched a child in a sexual way. I've also treated hundreds of sex offenders who have touched children in inappropriate ways. So I've seen both sides of that.
Are they generally menacing, physically imposing type people?
No, not at all. That is just a complete stereotype that you could look at someone and say, "Ooh, he's creepy. He looks like a child molester."
Yeah.
Most of the men that I've evaluated and treated who were child molesters are professionals. They look like you. They look like me, my husband. Many of them, have advanced degrees. Yeah, there's you cannot predict based on appearance what is going on.
And that's scary if they go into lockup and then they're with really violent people. I don't know if they would separate them in the penal.
Well, they do. Chomos, as they call them, in prison, are vulnerable to assault and murder, actually. And so sometimes if someone has been convicted of a crime involving a child at all, not just sexually, but at all, they're put in isolation instead of general population so that they can actually survive.
Yeah, they would be just totally killed very quickly, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So you seem to battle a lot of stereotypes. I was looking through your website, and
I do. That's a big commitment of mine.
your site addressed that. Has society become so pornographied? We just like, that's where a lot of our insecurities seem to come up.
Insecurities and notions about sex and what sex should be like and look like and feel like and sound like. And it's not a helpful depiction. I'm not anti-porn. I think there's a place for porn. I think porn can be used responsibly, individually and with couples. But I think that some of the themes perpetuate misogyny, and boys are watching this and thinking that this is how, you know, they should engage sexually with women. And there's so much more graphic porn now. So you can watch, you know, rape porn, you could watch bestiality porn, you could watch, you know, torture porn. And I think we are becoming desensitized to some of the themes that are so readily available now.
Yeah, it's so accessible. Gosh, when we were kids, there was nothing even close to this now.
Yeah, we had to like find magazines.
Yeah.
In some uncle's attic or something, right?
You had to really work for that.
You had to really work for it. You had to really work for it. And the accessibility of it and the amount of it and the fact that it's, you know, free, you don't have to spend money.
It's just amazing how easily you can call up a video on your phone.
Absolutely. I treat a lot of men who are not sexually responsive to so-called vanilla sex. That, you know, conventional lovemaking, whatever you want to call it, is just not exciting enough or arousing enough for men to be able to maintain an erection or have an orgasm. That they need more and more graphic, more and more perverse themes and activities in order to be able to go through those phases of sexual response. It's a real problem. I call it porn-induced erectile dysfunction. But I treat younger and younger guys. When I started doing this work 30 years ago, most of my patients with erectile dysfunction were 55 plus.
Wow.
Now I see guys in their 20s who are so dependent on their own hand for masturbation from with porn that they don't have sufficient sensation or stimulation inside of a partner's body.
That's just, you can't compete with that when you see images.
You cannot compete. The tightest vagina, the tightest anus is not going to be as tight as a grip of your own fist.
Right. That is so true. And then just the images of the people who were in those videos, it's like, you know, the backstory of and how sad a lot of those people are too, that they're.
Oh yeah. I treat a lot of people in the adult entertainment industry. So I've seen firsthand porn stars, if you will, some of whom are very proud and empowered by their work, and some who feel very much traumatized and exploited by their work.
Yeah, I think about that, just like the psychology behind that. It's you're willing to do something so intimate in front of the world. I mean, it's the world. Anybody can call this up anywhere you need to on a phone.
100%.
Yeah, they've got to be. They've got to probably talk that out. It's I can't even imagine how they can function.
And it's so surprising the degrees and ranges of resiliency. How some people, you know, are like, I do this, I love this, I'm proud of this, I have nothing to apologize for, nothing to be ashamed of. And then you have people who are just terrified that it's going to come out and that their parents or grandparents might watch these videos, and how to predict who's going to embrace it versus who's going to be traumatized by it. It's really fascinating work.
Yeah, it must be. Wow, very exciting field that you've chosen, and there's always an interesting thing, and it's constantly changing too. Like the latest thing is, what is a demisexual?
Oh my gosh, you're funny. There's so many terms now. It's hard to even keep up with them. These terms change like people change their underwear. So, you know, people use these terms in different ways. Sapiosexual, barsexual, demisexual, you name it. Bar sexuality. Have you heard that term?
No, never have.
That's a term for women, usually college age women, who make out with other women in bars for the titillation of men who aren't actually bisexual or gay,
It's just
but just the kind of titillating energy. So that the term bar sexual comes from, like, I'm only this way when I'm in a bar, so to speak.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It can be for anything. You can make up
It could
anything.
be for anything.
Wow.
It could be for anything. Yeah.
In a bar and get a guy jealous, and that really arouses him.
Yeah, and not to say that there aren't women who enjoy kissing women legitimately, but that term specifically relates to women who are sort of using that as a tease, not to make men jealous, but to turn men on, because a lot of men have a fantasy around threesomes, or like to watch so-called girl on girl activity. It's a very popular search topic in search engines.
Oh yeah. Oh, gosh, if you see that search engine, my gosh.
Right? But do you know what the most common, see, I've treated probably more than 5,000 adults, and probably at least 3,500 to 4,000 of them have been men. So I have unique insight into the mind of men, both gay and straight and trans. But the most common erotic preference that men share with me, do you want to guess?
Oh gosh.
And this is for gay and straight men.
Gay and straight.
But it's more commonly spoke about from articulated in straight men, and there's a reason for it. But yeah, guess what would you think?
Oh gosh. Maybe some men like humiliation or something like that.
Oh, you're kinky, Robert. That's popular, but that's not the most important. That's not the most common one.
God, it's out now. No, I don't actually.
Your secret is safe with me and all of your listeners. Just kidding. A lot of men talk about, threesomes and being with mother-daughter and all this sorts of stuff that you might expect or predict. But the one consistent thing that I hear from men, no matter what age, for 3 decades in a row, is that an enthusiastic partner is the most exciting experience of sex.
Oh yeah.
Just having sex with someone who's having fun and wants to express him or herself with you, and doesn't appear to be bored or embarrassed or shut down. That's the thing. That's men tell me, I just want to be with a man or a woman who wants to have a good time and wants me. That's it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you're gay or straight or whatever you are. Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
That is a huge ingredient to it. But yeah, it's you probably find though, and I always hear this too, is that men feel they're not getting enough, and women say they're getting too much. Yep.
That's definitely a common dynamic, but I see that shifting more and more in my office. I have women dragging their husbands in, saying that the women want more sex and that the husbands are disinterested. So there's definitely the flip side of that. And that seems to be more and more common.
So that is
my primary theory around that is just porn, that men would rather engage in solo sex than partner sex because of the intensity of the porn and the fantasy. And sometimes it's because they feel not sexually attracted to their wife anymore. maybe they've gained weight, maybe they're angry, maybe there's trust issues. There's so many barriers. It's really much more than just what's on the surface. There's a lot of stuff. Sometimes women drag their husbands in and say that they have ED, and then I meet with the men and they say, I have ED with my wife, but not with my girlfriend.
Oh gosh.
Or I have ED with my wife, but not with my boyfriend. And so I'm more interested in the subjective experience than I am in the objective behavior, right? So what is someone thinking about, fantasizing about, what is the fuel behind their sexual function? Not necessarily what they're doing, but what they're thinking and feeling. That's what I'm interested in.
So you probably see more of these sexless marriages. You probably seen couples who haven't.
I specialize in sexless marriages. It's one of my most favorite demographics to work with. Just incredibly complicated dynamics. And I have a pretty good track record, if I may say so, on helping couples kind of get back on the sexual horse. Because once they decide to come see me, they've already invested in their sexual health. Once they acknowledge to each other that they value sex and want to bring sex back into their relationship, that's half the battle.
Yeah, that first step.
Sometimes couples will say, we haven't had sex in 6 months. We haven't had sex in 4 years. We haven't had sex in 27 years. Like, you would be surprised how easy it is to get stuck in a sexless relationship, and it just takes on a life of its own. And it's really hard to course correct on your own without professional support.
Yeah. And that first step is calling you. You do consultations, 15 minutes over the phone.
I do provide free 15-minute phone consultations. And I also provide teletherapy or coaching for people across the country and the world. And I provide actual therapy for people in Ohio and California, because those are the 2 states where I'm licensed.
Excellent. And we could see this on your website. What is your URL, your website?
It's just my name, KimberlyResnickanderson.com.
Okay, yeah. And Resnick is spelled, because I knew another Resnick in our
There was another Resnick, my nemesis. No, just kidding. Love you, Deborah.
I'm gonna get her on here one day too.
She'd be fun guest too. Yeah. So I'm Resnick.
That's
and then Anderson with an O-N, because there's a couple of ways to spell that too.
No, yeah, because when you came into the school system, I thought it was a little later than Debbie. So
yep, I started in 9th grade. Yep.
Right. Oh, that's
yep.
Wow.
What a trip! What a trip!
It is. It is. What a small world. So I love your website. You have this thing called a sexual IQ quiz.
I do.
Awesome.
I do. It's just a quick little 10-question instrument for people to assess their level of information and comfort with sexuality. People can take that little quiz on my website, and then I give the answers and explain why those are true or false. There's a link to my podcast through my website. So you can listen to all the episodes of Sex Savvy. Then I have many videos that I produced about a wide range of sexual health topics. I have a blog. There's a link to my press page where you can read, more than 100 different articles I've been quoted in, and learn about different just philosophies around sexuality and topics that are pertinent.
Neat. Did I see you on the Learning Channel? Did you do some?
I did. TLC. Yeah, I was involved in a program called Strange Sex.
Yeah.
So I was a consultant for them and an on-camera expert. So I interviewed a number of people on that show. I was in about a dozen episodes. You can still find that on Hulu or Netflix, I think. Strange Sex. It aired for a couple of seasons, and it was a lot of fun.
Neat. And I had your son on the show, Duncan. We'll give him a little plug here. I always like.
Yay, Duncan.
you'll see that I bring up and I promote past episodes as well.
Good
And
for you. Good. That's great. Yeah, he had a blast.
it's
He
wonderful,
up
yeah.
and coming actor, DJ, music producer in the,
Yeah.
in the City of Angels. So he had a blast. Thank you for sharing his work with your
Yeah.
listeners.
I've been catching up on Generation. You talk about sexuality. Oh my,
Whoa, yeah. What a great show, huh?
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. When I'm watching it, I'm in the gym. People are like, I'm like, gotta cover it. My God.
Wear your generation flag proudly.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a great show, and there's so much good material now available to kids.
yeah.
Where in our day, it was not, there was not the level of community and support out there. So there were a lot of kids who were living, very much alone.
Yeah, back in our day, there was just no awareness about all this stuff. And there were kids who I'm sure were like in the closet, afraid to come out.
For sure. Or trans, or have violent sexual fantasies, or have been abused, or, I mean, you name it. Of course, there's so much of that going on all the time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this has been awesome. I really enjoyed this. Just best of luck, and just hopefully we'll see more of you on TV. The
Thank
videos
you.
on the website are awesome. Just really enjoyed watching those things. And
Thank you, Robert. So
yeah.
good to see you, my friend.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch, and hopefully we could do this again in the future.
All right. Enjoy Hotlanta.
Take care. Have a good
Okay. Bye-bye.